Okay. All right, welcome back. I just got done doing the introduction video for this week. Now what I want to do is I want to go over what my expectations are for writing project 2. So you can see this stuff here, just kind of an overview. Your initial post, meaning your actual rough draft, is due by June 26, 2016 by midnight. And then using these peer review questions, provide 5 points of constructive criticism for at least one other peer by June 29. So what that means is after you post your paper, find somebody else that posted their paper and give them 5 things that they need to change in order to improve their essay. You only need to do that for one person. Also, a point for constructive criticism, make sure that you're giving them things to change. If you're not telling them a specific thing to change within their essay, then you're not actually giving them constructive criticism, you're just giving them criticism. So I want constructive criticism. That could be as small as saying add a paragraph, or excuse me, add a comma here, or it could be as big as I don't like your entire literature review section, I think you need to add another paragraph explaining the problem or something like that. But just be very specific. I think you should change, or I think you should add whatever. All right, so first and foremost, before I get into this, let's go back to week 3 real quick, and let's open up the Writing Project 3 guidelines, Writing Project 2 guidelines. Because I told you guys last week I was going to go over the idea of variables, and that's kind of an important aspect of this, so let's open up the guidelines real quick so I can show you why. So here are the guidelines. Somewhere. There we are. Okay. So with the guidelines, basically what it tells you is that you are creating a paper, an essay. You're writing a full-blown essay on the topic that you chose in your last writing project. The last writing project was an annotated bibliography, so you just kind of made a thesis and said, I'm going to use these sources in some form or fashion to write an essay. Great. Now what we need to do is we need to look at what is the cause of your social issue. So let's go ahead and take that one to the board, because I think that's going to be a little bit more difficult to teach rather than, it's not something I can just tell you about. So, let's talk. Whoa, first I'm going to throw my pen across the room. All right, so the very first thing you need, you're going to need a topic. So, your topic is going to consist of 2 parts. 2 parts. You have, first of all, your social issue. What is your social issue? It's going to be your social issue plus something else. So what is your social issue? Let's say that maybe it's gun control, because that is just huge. You'll notice that I use that one a lot because that is the one that never goes away. It's like everybody's like, hey, let's do gun laws. No. And then the other side's like, no, let's don't do gun laws. And at the end of the day, you know what happens? Nothing. You know what? Let's just let it ride. We're just going to leave this one. We're gonna complain about it a lot, but we're not actually going to do anything about it, right? So, gun control. That's going to be number 1 issue. Let's say that maybe you wanted to do shaming on the internet, shaming on social media. That's one that I got this semester. Somebody's developing that essay. Actually, this physical classroom in right now. I mean, she's not in here, but in like an hour she will be, and she's writing an essay on how younger women are being shamed online through the use of social media. Kind of like bullying, but it's more focused on like body issues. Anyways, shaming on social media essay. Another one, abortion, like that is another one that just doesn't go away. It's like even though the laws are in place, nobody's happy. But I don't know. I've never done it, so I don't know anything about it. Abortion, and then what else? Another social issue. Pretty much anything to go on with racism, right? I mean, like everybody's experienced something like that, like you've seen it on TV, or maybe they've personally experienced it. Everybody's had some sort of run-in with the idea of racism. So that might be another one. So most of the time, oh hey. Just that. Okay, sorry about that. Remember how I said like an hour? Well, they're actually starting to trickle in already. So, but luckily she went down to the computer lab. So we're all alone again. So anyways, racism, that's another one. I'm going to erase all of these because this social issue, most of the time, this is going to end up to be your X variable. Okay, so we're just gonna write X, and I'll come back to that. Don't freak out. Like, what is X? I'll explain that in a second. So let's choose one. Let's just go with gun control since it's like the easiest one to talk about. Now, if this is our social issue, you need to figure out why this happens. What is the cause of the problem of gun control? First of all, what is the actual problem here? Gun control. We got to be more specific. There is a lack of gun control, maybe, or maybe the idea of gun control is a problem. Whatever it is, I just put that because that's easy. So this is probably going to be our X. Now, what causes this? What causes a lack of gun control to be a problem? Or what causes a lack of gun control? Let's just go, I mean, with this it needs to be controversial. You can't just be like, well, obviously, legislation. Nobody's made any, okay? No one's made any legislation to stop our guns from being bought, so there's still a problem. What you need is something that's a little bit more controversial, and the way that you get that is you keep asking why. So let's go with lack of legislation. So the cause of this is the lack of legislation. That means that nobody has made the bills, so nobody paid the bill. No, and nobody's made the bills, so nobody is passing those bills. So there's a lack of legislation. But now you got to keep asking why, because you got to find out, is that really the heart of your problem? Why is there no legislation? Well, there's some sort of political agenda, and so you could have, if you said why is there a lack of legislation, and then you could say, the real reason there's no legislation is because we haven't come to an understanding, we haven't come to a compromise yet. And we'll call that gun versus no gun. There's no compromise between the people that say, we need to get rid of guns, versus the other people that say, nope, we need more guns. There's really no compromise yet, so we can't create a bill because nobody can agree on what they want. So there's no compromise. That's the real problem here. But again, you ask yourself why. Why is there no compromise? Now this is where it starts to get really controversial. Let's say that you feel like there needs to be gun laws. There needs to be gun control. So at that point, you could come down here and you could say there's no compromise because people won't give up their guns. Okay? Well, they won't give up their guns. So those people in whatever states won't give up their guns, and because of that, they keep this argument going, and nothing ever gets done. But then you ask again, why? Why won't people give up their guns? Well, there's a something in society has made these people feel that way. So we'll go with, and this is where you really start to get into the meat and potatoes. What is the real problem? We could say that there's a strong hunting culture. People like to hunt, so they feel like they need their guns all the time. Or maybe there's probably more relevant to what we're talking about, is there's no feeling of, people don't feel safe. People don't feel safe in the community. So that's what's really causing the problem. We call that a lack of safety. So at that point, you're starting to find something that you can really grow off of. You could easily say, and it's controversial enough, to where you could say people don't feel safe, therefore we don't have gun control. X leads to Y. Excuse me, in this case I got it backwards. But nonetheless, this is the cause. People don't feel safe, so we end up with no gun control. You could again ask the reason why, but you can pretty much always ask the reason why. You need to ask why until you can get to a controversial reasoning as to why your social issue exists in the first place. Because you could say, why don't people feel safe? And you could say, well, because they feel like they're going to get shot all the time. I mean, that you could say that, and then, okay, that still kind of boils down to they don't feel safe, so they feel like they're going to get shot. So you kind of end up, once you get down to where you basically have the same answer over and over and over again, that's when you know that you have something that's controversial, and you know that you've got something that's going to work. But of course, if you have any questions, feel free to pass them on to me, and I'll help you decide is it controversial, does it work, whatever. Now, this is when people don't feel safe. We're going to use that as our other one, our cause. We'll say lack of safety. Now I'm going to get rid of this X real quick, mainly because I think I put it up there mistakenly. But what I'm looking for in the causal analysis is not necessarily, because you can call this a cause and effect paper, but I'm not so much interested in the effects. I am purely interested in what you think is the cause of your social issue. So it really boils down to this. X causes Y. This is more or less what you're trying to prove in your essay. So in this case, a lack of safety, so I gotta have these backwards. A lack of safety, which is X, causes ever came on. Now I can't see you guys or see myself. All right, there we go. X causes Y. Lack of safety causes a lack of gun control. Now you're going to explain that, of course, but this is more or less what your paper is trying to prove. Now, if you feel like this is too much of a gap, what you could do is maybe instead of saying it's a lack of gun control, it's a lack of compromise. A lack of safety leads to a lack of compromise between the two parties. That would be like the two parties being people that want gun control versus people that don't want gun control. On gun control. So that's kind of explaining it a little bit, but nonetheless, that is more or less what your paper is going to be about. The X that causes Y. That's what I mean when I'm talking about variables, because you have two variables there. You have an X variable and a Y variable. The X causes Y, okay? What is your X and how does it cause, or what is your X, what is your Y? How does X cause Y? Now when you're writing your essay, you're going to have a couple things. In your essay, you're going to have 5 parts. Now, you remember in high school when they said, you got to have 5 paragraphs in an essay. You don't need 5 paragraphs. You need more than 5 paragraphs. But in an essay, you need 5 sections. Almost always, you're going to need at least 5 sections. Now, the further you go in your academic career, you're going to need even more. Because, like, for instance, I'm writing a paper right now, and it's got, like, 50 sections. But that's a big paper. And that's a lot of writing. But the point being is that 5 paragraphs just doesn't cut it after the last day of high school, right? So, in your 5 sections, you're going to have an intro. You're going to have a literature review. Number 3, you're going to have your causation. Number 4, you're going to have your evidence of that causation. And 5, you're going to have the conclusion. Now the intro, that's going to basically explain what you're talking about. You're going to have 3 things. You're going to have the hook, where you try and hook the reader by giving them something interesting. What I usually do, because I always tell people, don't use questions. Don't use questions in your essay, because questions in an essay just leave your reader with more questions most of the time. And it lets them answer a question and then go off on a tangent thinking about dinosaurs or whatever it is they thought of whenever if you ask what's the worst way to die, and all of a sudden they're thinking of what's that one movie, Final Destination, and then they're thinking like, oh, you remember that one scene when that log dropped off that thing and just blew through that police car and just mashed that guy to pieces, and then all of a sudden I'm like, what are we talking about again? So that's why you don't want to ask questions, because you leave people off in tangents in their mind, and eventually they're at the bottom of a page and they've been thinking about something else completely off topic, and they are just done with your essay, okay? So the way I do this, however, is I always start off with a question. So ask a question, ask yourself a question. That is, ask yourself a question that most people would find interesting. What's the worst way to die? But instead of asking that question to the reader, you answer that question. You figure it out. I'm going to go with fire or maybe drowning. But I've heard that your eyeballs pop before you die when you're on fire. So I'm going to go with fire. So ask yourself the question, what's the worst way to die? Well, fire. And so that's where you start off your hook. Fire is arguably one of the worst ways to die. Okay? That will be your hook. And then people are thinking like, oh, okay, we're talking about death, we're talking about fire. I thought drowning was worse, but let's hear what this guy has to say. Okay, great. So ask them questions and then answer. This answer, however you answer that question, that becomes your hook. Not the question. The question is just for you. Ask yourself the question, then take that answer and make that your hook. Now you provide some background. Why did you just tell me that fire is the worst way to die? I mean, like, imagine a dude walking into the room and be like, fire is the worst way to die. And then he just walks out. And you're like, oh, okay. Why did he just do that? Why did he come in and tell you that fire was the worst way to die? Is he going to burn your house down? Like, that's the original question. I mean, if he comes in and he's like, it'd be pretty sad if somebody just shot you. And then you're like, well, what? So you got to give me a little background. Why did you just tell me that fire is the worst way to die? Is it because you're going to burn my house down? If it is, tell me in the background. That way I know. But if it's not, also tell me, why are we talking about this? So I'm going to put why. Now that background, that can be several sentences. The hook is just one. The thesis is just one. But you could have 3, 4 sentences in your background, and that would be fine. Try to have at least more than one, because otherwise, 3 sentences is like the minimum for a paragraph. But if you end up with a 3-sentence paragraph, your paragraph is probably too short. I mean, not 100% of the time, but most of the time, it's too short. So after you get those couple sentences, the thesis, you guys are working on that right now. So you'll plug in your thesis at the end of that paragraph of the introduction. Make sure you have one sentence for your thesis, and make sure you plug it in as a last sentence in your introduction. Okay. Now, literature review. What are you doing here? Explain the problem. And remember how your social issue is like the topic? The social issue is your problem. Explain to me why we have a lack of, what did we say? Oh, a lack of compromise. Explain to me how there is a lack of compromise. Explain how some people want gun control. Explain how some other people don't want gun control. If you're talking about abortion, explain why one person wants abortion, why another person doesn't want abortion. This literature review is basically going to be an explanation of the two sides of the general argument. What is one side of the argument? What is the other side of the argument? Explain both sides to your audience in that literature review, in that problem. Now the causation. Now you have to start explaining what is the problem. What is the cause of the problem? If you said it's a lack of safety and that's what causes a lack of compromise on gun control, great, explain that. After you've explained that problem, now you give me evidence. This is going to be a very short, it'll probably be one paragraph. It'll just be one paragraph where you explain what you think it is, and then the evidence is where you're going to use all your sources. You're going to say there's lack of compromise because of this, this, and this. This person says that there's lack of compromise because of this, this, and this. They're right because of these statistics. Whatever it is, this is where you provide evidence. Basically, prove that causation. Whatever this is, prove it here. The conclusion, super easy. You have 5 parts to review. It's just review, 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 review. Okay? I'm gonna put it up here. First thing you want to do, review your thesis. Okay? Remind everybody why we're doing this. Remind them what your thesis was and why you're talking about this topic and this causation. After you've done that, review the literature review. And when you're reviewing, don't give me all of it again. Just give me the main points, the highlights from that section. Review the literature review. Review the causation section. Again, just give me the highlights. Review the evidence section. And again, just give me the highlights. Uh-oh, I'm losing it. There we go. 5, give them a closing sentence. What should they do now? Basically, you just gave them this 4 to 5 page essay. They read it. They read the whole thing. They thought, that's awesome. That is a smart person right there. I like their idea. Now what? What do you want them to do? What should they do? Now that and this is kind of an explanation, now that you've come to understand the lack of compromise that exists because of the lack of safety in the world that is causing our gun laws to run rampant, now you must write a letter to your legislator. Now you must vote yes on Proposition 175 or whatever it is. What do you want them to do? What is the purpose of your essay? Whatever the purpose is, that's what you want them to do. So remind them there what you want them to do. Okay, so that's how the essay goes. In case you've forgotten, I've actually given you a template. I'm going to pull that back up right now. And let's pop that guy back on. All right. You have a template in week 4. I highly suggest you use it because it has everything that I just explained written into a little bitty paragraph, and all you got to do is plug in your essay. If you don't want to do it, if you don't want to use that, I still suggest using what I put back here, but where did it go? It's down here. Use this template and literally just plug in what you need to plug in. Once you've done that, again, post your rough draft here on by June 26th at midnight, and after you've posted your essay, read someone else's essay by June 29th and provide them with 5 pieces of constructive criticism. And constructive criticism, remember, means that you give them 5 things to change about their essay that will improve their essay. Not just good job or you suck, but actually like this could be changed and this is how I would change it, or add a comment here, or add a paragraph here, or tell me more about the problem, or I don't really believe that your causation is real. Maybe expand on it, something like that. Nonetheless, that's what I got for this week. Go ahead and send me any questions you have. Skype, text, phone call, email, any of those. I'll be available. And if not, good on you. Other than that, have a good week, and I will see you guys in week 5.